Hello, welcome to another edition of the Roundhouse Report. It's Jody Roundhouse. The Associated Press, as many of you already know, has been almost an epicenter of liberalism in terms of how it chooses to phrase things in its articles. Its journalism and news articles are different than op-eds. So many times the Associated Press, and I read them because my stupid local newspaper uses the Associated Press a lot, so I'm like forced to read it until I go online. So, I don't know if you can see it or not. Enjoy your own house? Anyhow, like one time Trump did something good, and instead of it being an objective article, it was like the first paragraph, seeking to deflect attention from potential Russian collusion, President Trump did something good. So that, it's just freaking ridiculous. But for once, and this time because it hit home. Can you see that? I forgot the date today. Today is March 27th. This newspaper is from March 26th. By the Associated Press. I'm going to just very quickly, as you can see, I've highlighted it. I'm going to run through it, and you will see how odd it is to find the Associated Press writing in defense of Israel and writing against Hamas, which typically, that's the terrorist organization that governs the Gaza Strip, which is that's a territory that the Palestinians have. The Gaza Strip is currently under blockade by both Egypt and Israel, but for some reason, only Israel gets yelled at for it by everyone. The AP in particular. They've been holding weekly the Palestinians in Hamas in the Gaza Strip, not to be confused with the West Bank. That's controlled by a different Palestinian faction. These weekly protests after Friday prayers or whatever on the border with Israel, trying to, it's because of the blockade, and they're all saying like, death to Israel. They had a unique thing where they would light things on fire and put them on balloons and like send the balloons into their crops into Israeli farming regions. Found that interesting in the kibbutzes, however you pronounce it. But everyone, I'm sure you've seen this, Israel's killing protesters. All right, well, first of all, Google Palestinian slingshot. Google Palestinian slingshot, and you'll see exactly what the media is talking about when they say that they were throwing rocks at Israeli soldiers. These slingshots, there used to be slingers in ancient armies. Those are deadly weapons. They were mobile, light units that would sling stones, like Saint King David in the Old Testament. David and Goliath, he had a sling. You build up momentum, and you get good at it. You practice just like you would archery, and then whoo, you release a freaking like a rock the size of my freaking fist, and it's going like 30, 40 miles an hour. If that hits you in the head, even if you have a freaking helmet on, that could cause a permanent brain injury. That could kill you. It could paralyze you. So whenever they say that, yeah, the Palestinians are throwing rocks at Israel, so Israel fired back. Okay, well, those rocks that are being thrown, they're like bullets. Just keep that in mind. Those are like bullets. So Palestinian sling, or Palestinian sling, or Palestinian slingshot. Google that and take a look at what it looks like and how it's used. It's really quite interesting. In ancient armies, like I said, they would have contingents of these. There would be 1,000 slingers. You would send 500 on your left flank and then 500 on your right flank. They worked in unison with archers, with infantry, etc. But again, I'm getting off point. Here is the article. I'm going to just read some bullet points to show you how odd this is coming from the Associated Press. Israeli forces on Monday struck targets, in case you don't know, in the last week or so, or 2 weeks, Gaza the Gaza Strip, which Hamas controls, which, by the way, is an internationally recognized terrorist organization that has ties to Iran, Syria, etc., Russia even. I lost my train of thought. What are we going to do? I'll just go on. Israeli forces on... Oh, yeah, for the last week, seemingly unprovoked, Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip, let's just say the Gazan army, for all intents and purposes, the Hamas army, unprovoked, they just started firing rockets in Israel again, into southern Israel. Again. Okay? Some of them, I believe, are intercepted. Others fell in unpopulated areas. One, actually, though, one or two hit houses and, like, blew up smithereens. They're actually showing pictures of Israeli houses getting blown up instead of Palestinian houses. This is the picture of the Israeli house that was hit. I don't know how well you can see it. So they've been going tit for tat, Israel versus Hamas ever since. Hamas will launch 10 rockets. Israel will do some airstrikes. There was a tentative ceasefire, and then this happened. This is breaking news. Israeli forces on Monday struck targets across the Gaza Strip, including the offices of Hamas's supreme leader, in response to a surprise attack from the Palestinian territory, as the military bolstered its troops in rocket defense systems in anticipation of a new round of heavy fighting with the Islamic militant group. I don't know if I read that right. The Israelis are the ones bolstering their crap up. The Israeli army said air raid sirens wailed across southern Israel late Monday night, and Israeli media reported at least 10 rockets fired into the country, but it provided no further details. When it provides no further details, that means it's done damage, which I just showed you the little picture it did. At the White House, you had Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, who's going to be up for re-election, him and his party coalition soon. He has unquestioning approval from the White House. At the White House, he said, Israel will not tolerate this. I will not tolerate this. And he cut his trip to Washington to see Trump early. He cut his trip off early, and he went home because of this incident. This is how seriously they take it over there. Ahead of the Israeli airstrikes, Hamas's leadership went into hiding. That makes sense. Several airstrikes rocked Gaza, including an explosion that destroyed the office of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. The Israeli military issued a statement confirming it bombed the building, which had, quote, served as an office for many military meetings, end quote. An earlier blast, this is funny as shit. For so many different reasons, this is very, very funny. You ready? You ready? For real. Seriously, you ready? An earlier blast destroyed a multi-story building in Gaza City, which is a sprawling city. An earlier blast destroyed a multi-story building in Gaza City that Israel said had served as a Hamas military intelligence headquarters. There were no immediate reports of casualties. In both blasts, Israel fired warning shots to evacuate the buildings. You'll never hear the Associated Press tell you that Israel went out of its way to not kill civilians. And they're saying Israel fired warning shots to evacuate the buildings. They waited a little bit, and then they blasted it. To continue from the article, but the airstrike on the multi-story building was so powerful, it sent debris flying onto the roof of the Associated Press Bureau, located on the 11th floor of a nearby high-rise in Gaza City. Associated Press got freaking wrecked. I wonder if it did any damage to them, man, because I really don't like the Associated Press. I wonder if it blasted out their windows or something, But that's why I think they got a freaking chip on their shoulder now. In Beirut, the powerful Lebanese militant group Hezbollah said its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, met Monday with a Hamas delegation led by top official Saleh Orori. I don't know how to say these names. Hamas is facing domestic turmoil now, which it normally hasn't in the past. There's been solidarity between the population of Gaza, which is suffering under the blockade, but the blockade's in place because Hamas keeps firing these freaking rockets. Anyhow, Hamas seized control of Gaza from the rival Palestinian Authority 12 years ago. The Palestinian Authority, I believe that's the governing body of the West Bank. Yeah, so Israel gave them back their land, and the Arabs, the Palestinians, immediately had a civil war, Hamas versus the Palestinian Authority. And Hamas kicked out the Palestinian Authority, and now Hamas has been there for the past 12 years. An Israeli-Egyptian blockade imposed to weaken Hamas, this is back to the article, combined with sanctions by the Palestinian Authority and mismanagement by the Hamas government. The Associated Press is acknowledging mismanagement. By mismanagement by the Hamas government have all fueled an economic crisis that has left Gaza with an unemployment rate above 50%. Normally, anything that has to do with like how bad off things are in Gaza, they always blame Israel. This time they're blaming Hamas. Huge breakthrough. That's odd. It's very bizarre, this whole thing. Hamas has been leading weekly protests along the Israeli border for the past year in hopes of easing the blockade. Again, why aren't they messing with Egypt? Because Egypt is blockading them also. So what? It's because they're Arab, I guess. But the demonstrations in which some 190 people have been killed by Israeli fire have done little to improve conditions. All the innocent medics, this is how they rolled at those protests. If you watch them on YouTube, they set burning tires on fire. It emits thick black smoke billowing in the front of the protesters. So the Israeli forces on their side of the border can't see. They're getting hit with those freaking bullet rocks that I told you about earlier. They have no idea what's going on. They don't mess around. Both sides hate each other. I mean, the Jews and the Arabs, they do not like each other. So they're getting hit by these rocks. They don't understand what's happening, so they fire into where they're getting hit by. They fire into the smoke, and then Hamas, they intentionally do that, and then they retreat, and then they let the innocent ones, like the medics, get shot. Okay, that's how Hamas rules, or that's how they roll. And other times they'll send out little strike groups to punch through the protesters and they have rifles and stuff, and they'll start firing with live ammo in I think maybe a grenade or Molotov cocktails, live ammo, and then they'll immediately get back behind the ranks of the actual peaceful demonstrators who will seconds later be shot at and killed and wounded. So that's another bias that the AP, again, I'm really kind of blown away here. But to go back to the last paragraph, last week, hundreds of Gazans protested the dire conditions in the Gaza Strip. A rare expression of public discontent against the authoritarian government of Hamas. Hamas responded with a violent crackdown against its own citizens, beating and arresting dozens of demonstrators and drawing rare public criticism. Any of you who knows anything about this issue will know, especially if you link it with the Associated Press and how they typically report things with such a liberal bias, will know that this is really, really weird. And I think if that debris had not hit their building, I don't think they would have written the article the way that they did. But anyhow, so Jody Roundhouse, the Roundhouse Report. I meant to keep this under 10 minutes. Sorry, it's going on 14 minutes, but please subscribe. I'm supposed to say that at the beginning, whatever. All right, check me out on minds.com/Jody Roundhouse. Jody with a Y. If it's spelled with an I, that's a girl's name. But Jody has traditionally, until the 19th century, been a man's name. So Jody with a Y, Jody is a man's name, and then Roundhouse. My parents grew up in the 60s. 1960s America. So, all right. Hit it.